Personal selling is another one of our IMC tools that is very distinctive in terms of what it allows for marketers to do. It is mostly considered to be a face-to-face type of opportunity. It's a very different kind of selling than what you would see with advertising. It's more of an interpersonal kind of communication where one person is talking to another person or one person is talking to a small group of people rather than advertising, which is far more mass communication oriented, where the brand is communicating to many at a time. With personal selling, the great benefit we get is this idea of relationship selling, right? The professional salesperson is really charged with creating a relationship with each individual prospect and therefore creating a customer for life. So there's 7 steps in the professional selling or personal selling process. And let's go through them kind of quickly here and maybe talk about a few of the steps in a bit more detail towards the end of this presentation. The first step is generating leads. You have to figure out who are prospects that you can approach to potentially sell your product. And to generate leads, you're going to need to do a variety of different things. You need to do networking first and foremost, so make connections across your industry, maybe outside of your industry. You may use tactics like cold calling, which is kind of calling people out of the blue or at random to see if you could generate some interest in your product. You also would want to do things like maybe go to trade shows if that is something that is important in your industry. Once you've collected a variety of leads, now remember we've talked about database marketing in the past, you would take your leads and you create a database of them, and now you have this kind of list of prospects. Once you have your list of prospects, you can start to qualify your prospects. What I mean by qualifying your prospects is really determining, who is most likely to buy out of all the people on your prospect list. So typically speaking, you would kind of rank your prospects in terms of the likelihood and the I guess, timeliness in which they would purchase. Who is most likely to purchase now? Who is more likely to purchase later? Who is maybe not so likely to purchase at all? You'll then want to get a lot more knowledge about these prospects. You want to do as much research as you possibly can to understand their underlying motivation. Once you know what it is that motivates them, you can put together a sales presentation and then you can approach them and you can start to make your pitch. Your sales presentation may actually come in a variety of different forms. It may start with a sales letter. It may move on to a sales call where you're calling them on the phone. And then it may at some point move towards a one-to-one or personal type of presentation where you're actually visiting them and walking through a presentation similar to the one you're watching right now. Now, during this presentation, clearly customers or prospects are always going to have problems. They have objections. They're not just yes people who are nodding their heads at everything you say. They will have concerns. They will be skeptical. And so we're going to have to create some strategies for handling objections, which we'll talk about in a moment. Then you want to move, once you've handled your objections, you move to closing the sale. And this is where the sale is actually made, where the prospect agrees, yes, I want to purchase this product. They sign on the dotted line, you agree to terms, and all is good to go. But you're not done yet. You still need to provide some sort of after-sales service, which we'll talk about again in a moment. But this is really crucial to recognize that even though you've closed the sale and you've sold something, it's not done with. You still have to continually service the sale over time. And that's what we mean by customer for life and relationship selling. It's something that is ongoing, let's say. Now, I said we'd talk a little bit more about qualifying prospects, and there's a couple of good key terms that we want to make sure that we keep in mind. Specifically, you see here this idea of an 80-20 rule. And what that reminds us is that not all prospects are created equal. About 20% of our prospects provide us with 80% of our revenue. So to kind of keep it in the 80-20, 80% of our revenue comes from 20% of our customers. And so it reminds us that we want to make sure we are emphasizing and focusing on the correct prospects. And one of the ways in which we can kind of figure out who to focus on is we can remember that good prospects have 3 things. They have money to buy, so they have the purchasing power. They have a need for our product, and they also have the authority to make the purchase decision. And that's important because a lot of times in professional selling, we can waste our time talking to somebody who's not even given the responsibility for making a decision within their organization or within their family. In terms of handling objectives, this little process is awesome. This feel, felt, found approach for handling objectives, right? More often than not, the biggest objective someone would have when you're making a sales presentation, it's too expensive, right? So price is always one of the biggest objectives or objections, I should say, that they might have. And so how do you handle that when somebody says, hey, I can't buy this car, it's way too expensive? Well, you use feel, felt, found. I know how you feel. I look at the price tag on this car and it's expensive. I felt the same way when, they told me that this car is $50,000. But what I found when I started thinking about what that $50,000 meant is that you're really getting the quality that will help you to minimize your maintenance of the car over time. So, really in the long run, the $50,000, you're paying much less for the car than you would if you bought a cheaper car and then had to pay more on maintenance ongoingly. So feel, felt, found. I know how you feel. I felt the same way, but I found that it really was something different, something more positive. And then finally, this after-sales service. Follow through, follow up, and suggestion selling. Clearly, you always need to follow through. You make promises as a salesperson. You need to make sure you deliver on those promises. That's follow through. Follow up means that once everything's said and done, the product is delivered, all those kinds of things, a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, you call and you follow up, right? You took, hey, Mrs. Comforo, you took delivery of your new Lexus 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to call to make sure that everything's going well and that you're happy with the car. Is there anything I can do for you? That's your follow-up. And then suggestion selling can often happen when you're following up. Suggestion selling is when you try to buy, or I should say try to sell something in addition to what the customer has already purchased. So, hey, you bought this Lexus car, we're having this great deal on new sound systems. We can have one installed for you at this low price if you come in within the next week. So now, you might think of the term upselling, selling the person to the next level, selling them an additional service and additional augmented part of the product. So here we have professional selling, and you can see how it's really related to customers, it's related to interpersonal communication, and really developing these long-term relationships, not just one-time sales.